Probably same. He doesn't have that lore, man. Oh, that lore is great. Give it a chance, though. right, good morning, everybody. Just the same way we usually start. Can someone just confirm that they can both see and hear me? And then we can get going on this Monday. Perfect, thank you. All right, hopefully, after this week one, most of you, hopefully all of you, have been able to catch up and all of you are at chapter 5, where we talk about Roman numbers. I'll show the schedule here again. The rough schedule of where we would ideally like to be today. We're going to talk about, well, in general, we're going to talk about two um, number systems from history in a way, completely, in chapters 5 and 6, because we still have some connection to them today. Then we're going to transition to a build-up that gives us a better understanding of our current decimal system. Because the main issue here is that we do, let's suppose you have to scribble some arithmetic. Let me give you an example. What did I just do? Did I do something? No. Let me give you an example here. Let's suppose you're teaching grade, I don't know, 3. Sure. And you have to do 374 plus 293. Now, there's a big difference for most of us between doing something like this quickly on a piece of paper, if you need to, and teaching it. There's a big difference. If you just had to do it, you just say maybe a right to left method is the go-to for most people. 4 plus 3 is 7. Whoop, that was supposed to be a 7. 7. 7 plus 9 is 16, so I carry the 1, and then I have a 6, and I'm done. But when you have to really break this down one step at a time and motivate each step and be ready for confusion at every step, potentially, then it becomes a different game. And to that end, our goal in this part two, our main goal, is to really understand why we're doing everything we're doing. And uh, an effective way to do that is to step out of our comfort zone by looking at something that looks a little bit stranger, a little bit more foreign. Go back in history, we're not as used to those number systems, while still having this focus in the background. By looking at something a little bit less obvious and less familiar, we really have to slow down and think what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then when we come back eventually to our familiar number system, we can look at it maybe in a more clear way that if I'm sitting in front of little Timmy and he doesn't understand why I carry the 1, well, what am I really doing and how can I say it in different ways that would help him to understand? In order to do that, it's not sufficient for me to just be able to do it and then expect Timmy, well, why didn't you just carry the 1, Timmy? What's wrong with you? Just do it. He doesn't understand. It's foreign to him, just like learning a brand new number system might feel foreign to me. It gives me a better understanding of his potentially his experience and how he might struggle with this. So that is the main goal I want to keep in mind when things feel a little strange, like why on earth am I doing this? I'll never teach. I don't even know if they teach Roman numbers anymore. To a lesser and lesser degree, and maybe not at all. um, because the main struggle is to get through the core material. Adding in Roman numbers and other things, there's often not much time for that. So you might think like, why do I even bother with these other number systems when I'm never going to teach them? It's not really about teaching that specific content as much as letting looking at other slightly different things and letting it improve my main skills. So keep that in mind as you um, perhaps struggle with little bits here and there. What our main goal is. Okay, so like I said, where's our schedule here? We're looking at mainly chapter 5, 6, and 7. 5 we'll look at Roman numbers, then tomorrow we'll look at Babylonian numbers, and then Thursday, which is also a big day, they're all big days, we cross over and build up to our decimal system while still keeping it a little more familiar, but a little less, so that we can still think carefully about what we're doing. Okay, I'm just rambling on because I don't hear or see any questions yet. Like always, this is um, dependent on, or what we talk about is dependent on your questions.
Professor, would you mind doing problem 5.6, number 3, page 60?
Problem. Oh, okay, I went too far. Problem 5.6. Which one?
Number 3.
Number 3. Sure, we're going to jump right in. Awesome. So if anyone is confused by this, for some we might need to take a step back, but we'll jump back and forth depending on your questions. Let me just check. Someone's asking about exercise 5.3. Is that exercise not in the video? Have you watched the video and it doesn't make sense? Whenever anyone asks me about an exercise, I'm gonna ask, is it in the video? Have you watched the video over multiple times? Is there something wrong with that exercise explanation in the video? Because I don't remember. There might be an exercise question missing in a video, so I just want to check. So while you think about that, oh, wrong one. Right, good. We'll just continue. So it's problem 5.6, number 3. Oh, all of them, really. The arithmetic. So what is our goal here, mainly, with the Roman numbers? And it's going to be the same in the next chapters. We have to be able to convert a Roman number to a decimal number. We have to convert a decimal number to a Roman number. And we're not going to make them super big. We'll stay under a million to not have it be ridiculous, because the Roman number system wasn't created with extremely large numbers in mind. They didn't have a need for it when they created it. So it gets a little silly when you have lines over lines and things like that. So it's interesting to know what you can do if things go over a million, but we won't need it in a test. So two directions of arithmetic, conversion, two directions of the conversion. And then we are going to do addition, subtraction, and multiplication. Division is a little different. We're going to leave that for part 3. There's no real benefit, in my opinion, to look at division in these number systems. It doesn't really add anything, and the division method is a little different as well. So when we talk about addition, subtraction, and multiplication, it's important to realize that our method is not fundamentally going to change. When we do, whoopsie, I'm just going to do an easier subtraction, because the one you asked for perhaps will make some people uncomfortable. It's probably the hardest we can do, right? So if we look at what we're used to doing, Let's suppose we take 241, yeah, sure, 1, minus 93. Now we're used to doing this, and our method is not going to change. The basic method for written arithmetic is right to left. So you start with the ones column, and it's not the only one. And when you do mental arithmetic, then things are a little different, but that's usually the one they're going to teach. And that's the ones you'll see in workbooks and all kinds of things. So the key thing here is the borrowing concept, that you want to start with your ones column. 1 minus 3, so 1 take away 3, can't be done. So then I'm going to borrow one of the tens, and that then becomes 110 and the existing 1, so it's 11. And then the 4 is updated to 3. 4 tens become 3 tens. So now I have 11 minus 3, which is 8. And then I move over to the tens column, and I see, oh, I have 3 tens minus 9 tens. That's not going to work. So I borrow one of the hundreds column, and that then becomes 13 tens. And the 200 reduces to a 100. 13 minus 9 is 4. It's really 13 tens minus 9 tens gives me 4 tens. And then I still have the 1, and I'm done. So the method doesn't change. When we look at something simpler, I'm going to have to just move this. Let's just do, I'll just make my own. Why not? I don't want to take your, oops, I don't want to take your questions. So I'll make another one. When we do something similar, just to ease us into this. For Roman, let's just say, I don't know, 500. Let's make it maybe 60. Let's say maybe 3. Take away. Let's leave the hundreds. Let's say here maybe, I don't know, 90, and let's say 5, something like that. Now it should be, you should really make the columns very clear and use space as you need to, so that all the ones symbols are in the same column, nicely lined up. All the tens representations are all lined up, and so on. So give yourself some space. The first step really in this method is to line things up, which is not a skill I should take for granted when someone is learning these things for the first time. So my method is the same. 3 minus 5, it's not going to work. So now I borrow from the tens column. How much do I borrow? Question for you. How much
You
do
bought
I borrow?
10, we borrowed 10.
I'm always just going to borrow one of that column value, so 110. So now, conveniently, I can just scratch out that 10. It's now moved over. And here I have 13. Take away 5. So that I just represent, I can say it in English, of course. We're not going to do a whole language change. I just have to write the representation for 8, and sometimes it's straightforward, sometimes it's a subtractive pair. It depends what the answer is. Now I have left in the tens column 50 minus 90, which doesn't work again. So I'm going to borrow from the hundreds column. I'm always going to borrow 1, and then this 500 updates to 400, whatever its representation is. So now I have 150 take away 90, that's 60, and I just represent 60 however I need to. So some people are tempted to to look for patterns where that they can cancel letters always. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes um, it is as simple as a letter cancellation. Sometimes the subtraction has an answer that's looks a little different because of the subtractive pairs and things like that. So just do the subtraction and then whatever your answer is, represent that answer. And I'm done. So first, before we make it more difficult with subtraction, are there any questions on this? As we notice that the method is the same. We wouldn't do a completely different method. The method is still the same. I'm just stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit so that I can really focus on what the steps are in that method. It has to look a little strange. Otherwise, I'll just go and automatically do this without really thinking because I've done it so much. So that's the basic. And now we can think, well, how can we make this as difficult as possible? Well, the most difficult ones are ones that are like 200 minus, in the decimal case, 200 minus, let's say 47, where I don't have much and I'm going to have to keep borrowing. So if I go to the ones column, and I say 0 minus 7, can't do it. I need to borrow from the tens. Oh, there's no tens to borrow from. So I have to borrow from the hundreds to have something in the tens column to borrow. So obviously I borrow 100. Now I don't love the little subscript there. That is going to confuse poor little Timmy more often than not because I'm thinking of teaching. I'm not thinking about just doing it myself. There's no need for anything if I just need to do it myself. The whole point here is to become a better teacher at this. So I like to visibly update that number in that column, or that quantity in that column. Then my ultimate goal is to borrow uh, 1 from the tens column. That then becomes 9, and I have tens in the ones column. 10 minus 7 is 3. 9 minus 4 is 5, and I am done. So the same thing is going to happen here with problem, whatever that problem is. 5.6 number 3, m minus, let's just set it up. So now I have, let's see how much space do I need here. M minus dxvii. D is 100. X VII. So I line things up so I can see my columns and everything is nice and separated. So having space there is a really good idea, as much space as you need. So now I do the same method. Method doesn't change. I have nothing. There's no zero symbol here. It's just empty space. Minus 7. Can't do it. Need to borrow. There's nothing to borrow in the tens column. So I need to borrow to have something to borrow. Well, there's nothing in the hundreds column either. So I need to borrow from the thousands. How many do I borrow from the thousands column to the hundreds column?
1,000.
I always borrow 1 of that column's value. So 1,000, which is all I have. So that m pretty much just moves over, and now it's gone. Now I'm not yet in the hundreds column. I'm still just trying to chain this borrowing to get me to the ones column. So now I have to borrow from the hundreds column to the tens column. I borrow from the hundreds, so I'm going to borrow 100. And that then updates. I just do a complete update from 1000 to 900, which has its representation cm. Then I borrow. Please stop me and interrupt me at any stage during this. It's better if you interrupt me than if you wait until the end and say, oh, I didn't understand what you did in step 1. Well, I can't backtrack all this scratching out stuff. So feel free to interrupt me as I'm doing it, it's better. So I'm borrowing from the tens column to the ones column, which means I borrow a 10, and then the 100 updates to 90, and its representation is XC. Now I'm ready for the ones column. 10 minus 7 is 3. Done. Moving on to the tens column. I now should have enough. 90 minus 10 is 80, and 80 has its representation. Moving on to the hundreds column. 900 minus 500 is 400, and there's nothing left in the thousands column. So there we go. The method does not change. Things look a little strange, but even the Roman system, it's very much a decimal system. It's really just the symbols that you look at that are different. Underneath, we're still having columns of ones and tens and hundreds and thousands and so on. So the more we look at it, the more we should realize how similar, how close to a decimal system it is. It's not as efficient as our digits, and there's a reason we're not having Roman numbers really anymore, but it's still fundamentally the same system. But regardless, the method still doesn't change. Any questions on subtraction? We jumped a little ahead, and maybe you have questions about conversion, maybe you have questions about addition, multiplication.
Good morning, Stephen.
Morning.
I had a question about exercise. So the problem 5.3 problem where it's asked to give the number before and after.
Yes, there's a typo. Which one is it? Which number has the typo in the answers?
I wanted to know about the second one.
Second one. Yeah, okay, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Well, let me label this. Problem 5.3, number 2. So let's just double check. We want to write the number that comes before and after. So one before and one after. Now, this is sort of a conversion situation. I have 2000 as my given number. So I know the next one is going to be 2001. So then we just want to write 2001. And before that is going to come 1999. So it's really just a conversion question. I guess a more fun conversion question.
Well,
So,
I did get the answer. The thing is, when I checked it with what answer key that you have, there seems
yes,
to
I
be.
said there's a typo. Yeah, that's why we're doing it.
Okay, then it seems I probably am fine. Then.
We'll do it anyway. So I have 1,900 is 100 less than 1,000 special pair. 90 is 10 less than 100 special pair. 9 is 1 less than 10 special pair. All right, so now at least we have a working answer in case you look at it later. You can see, oh, this one is the updated. There's a typo somewhere. One letter is missing or something. I don't know. Can't remember. I try not to look at those. You should have confidence in your own answer.
Thank you.
All right. Let me make a new page while you think about some other questions. So our goal in terms of test questions is to prepare. It's only like 5 possible things we could ask, right? So it's not that much to prepare for. We just want to practice enough to be ready for the variety of the letters and symbols we could see. So like I said, we have two conversion questions, and it's really just a matter of understanding the system behind the number representation of the special pairs and After that, it's just very much decimal. So if I had to represent, let's just say conversion, I'm just doing my own thing since I don't see or hear any questions. I'll just do some conversion. If I had to convert like, I don't know, 37,489, then it's very much decimal, and you can do one digit at a time, which might help some people. So you can see the 30,000 separately. And now I'm going to write 30,000. Well, 30,000. Then the 7,000. Okay, well, that's 7. That's 1,000. And, sorry, no. Back it up. It's a, because 7 is 5 and another 2. 7,000 is going to be 5,000 and then 2,000. So it doesn't matter if those lines don't connect. If it makes it simpler for you, totally fine. Then 400 is a special pair. Yes, 400. Special pair. Any 4 and 9, up to and including 1,000 is a special pair. 80 is not a special pair. That is just going to be 50 and 3 tens. And then a 9 is a special pair again, like that. So if it helps you, you didn't realize that you could do that, it doesn't matter if the line is connected. Break them up one digit at a time because it is under the surface a decimal system. And then if we change it the other direction, what could I make that's interesting? Yes, not much. What should we do? Let's say maybe like this. What is this? Okay. Let's maybe make.
So what would
Come
happen?
up with some.
Could you also guide us if the number changes to 47? Because when we are representing 47, I'm not too sure for how we represent
47.
47,000.
You mean just 47?
47,000.
47,000. Oh, okay. Uh, no, I think what makes it simpler, if you have any sort of uncertainty, just break up one digit at a time. So 40,000. Now, that's past the thousands. My subtractive pairs don't really need to get updated. What is 40? 40 is 10 less than 50. And then I make it 1,000.
I get it. Yeah. Okay.
And then the 7,
Will
the
be
7 is the same, right?
5,000 plus.
Yeah. So 4,000 doesn't have a shortcut like that because our rule that we agree on is to not have any i's under the line. That then uh, makes it necessary to have a new subtractive pair, which is 1,000 less than 5,000. But once I go further on into tens and hundred thousands and bigger numbers or bigger digits, then I recycle existing subtractive pairs and just put a line over it.
Okay.
So there are only ones, tens, hundreds, thousands that have specific subtractive pair symbols.
Mhm.
So it doesn't continue forever.
Okay.
That was a C that I wrote here. Let me just finish this example in case someone has the issue, but they don't actually want to ask. So here as well, I'm going to do the top one in reverse, which means I just need to find the digits, so to speak, the places rather. So I see that XC is a special pair. So that's going to go together. That's going to be a tens number. Then I have some hundreds here, 2 of them. Then I have a special pair for the thousands. and then I have some bigger thousands. Now you can do it right to left to right, whichever one works for you. But once I've isolated the digits, now I just convert to our decimal digits. So I have 60,000, and the thousands digit is a 4,000, so 64,290. So it might help people to just separate and sort of plan this first. Otherwise, the letters all blur together and it gets confusing which one goes with which and where. So just have some separation and look at the digits because it is a decimal system. So that makes it much easier, I hope. And then any conversion I handle the same. It's just a matter of practice.
Sorry, how did you get the 4,000 and the 64,000? I thought the MV would be 1,000 plus
No, that's a
5
special pair. Just like
special pair.
4 is 1 less than 5, 40 is 10 less than 50, 400, whoops, 100.
Right, thank
400
you.
is 100 less than 500. 4,000 is 1,000 less than 5,000. So they all have the same pattern that I need to sort of look out for first.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any other questions on conversion that you can think of at this time? Once you get the hang of the Roman numbers, there's really not much to it, I'll be honest. There's not much. It's just a matter of getting used to the subtractive pair. That's I guess, the only tricky part. And then realizing that the arithmetic portion is exactly the same as you would do it on paper. So we could, someone's typing, so I will set up maybe some addition, since we might as well be thorough, unless there are some other questions, and talk about all three. It's a question, yay! Are you going to give us questions on the quiz that have 100,000s, meaning 2 lines? The 100,000s do not have 2 lines. It's once you cross over into the millions, that's where there could be 2 lines. And I don't see any benefit in doing that. I think if we stay under a million, so it could be 100,000, but there's only 1 line, and that's still, in terms of a test, that will assess if you understand what the line is used for or not. Having 2 or 3 lines on top of each other doesn't really, it gets a little silly, I think. And I don't think the system was designed for quantities that big. Uh, it was sort of a patch work, sort of a quick fix solution. When numbers got really big, they were like, "Oh, do we keep introducing new symbols more and more and more, or can we just sort of shortcut this and have it be a little bit efficient?" So they decided on the line, but it wasn't originally intended, I believe, with those large quantities in mind. So it gets a little silly, I think, if we go too big. So we'll stay under a million, 1 line, and I think that will get the point across. You either understand the line or you don't. And if I understand 1 line, I can do 3 lines. It's not really adding anything. All right. Now let's do a random addition question. So now I remember my decimal example that I'm used to. Maybe 493 plus 279. Nothing has changed. right to left, do my ones. 3 plus 9 is 12. That means 2 left in the ones digit and 110 is carried over. Then I'm in my tens column. 1, I say 1 plus 9 plus 7. That's not really what we're doing. It's 110 plus 9 tens plus 7 tens gives me 17 tens. And that's why the 7 stays in the tens column and 10 tens go over to 100. So it's important to be aware of these things in case a student might need that level of clarification. Like um, my 6-year-old, for example, needs to, it helps her a lot if she says 9 tens plus 7 tens instead of 90 plus 70 in some other situations. Makes a huge difference. But it's not something that she goes to immediately. So, from my point of view, I have to be aware of the pros and cons of saying things slightly differently because some people might need them. And then I have 1 plus 4 plus 2. It's not really. It's 100 plus 400 plus 200. But because I'm in the hundreds column, I don't say the 100 word every single time once I get comfortable with it. In the beginning, I might need to. So I get 700 and I'm done. Now, nothing changes when I look at the Roman situation. The only problem is that things aren't necessarily lined up for me. So if, for example, I just make some random numbers, it's surprisingly difficult to make random numbers here. Let's say here something like, I don't know, something like that. Maybe something like that, maybe. Plus, um, let's say something like this. I'm just making it up randomly because we don't have a lot of problems that we have available to practice. I don't want to take some of those. Where am I at now? Let's say maybe, oh, this is a nice one. Maybe like that. Maybe something like this. And maybe like that. There we go. So the arithmetic question, just like in the problems, will be given in one line. My first goal is to set it up before I can use my right to left method. And if I don't set it up right, that could very easily cause me to make a mistake. So maybe it helps me to um, just put some divider lines in each number first, maybe. So here I have 50,000, so that's a 10,000 number. Then here I have a special pair for 900. Then I have some tens, letters, and then the ones. Okay, so here I have 100,000 with C over with a line over it. Here I have another 10,000 number. There's a special pair for 1,000. There is my divider for hundreds, tens, and ones. Okay, so that might help me. So now I just want to give myself enough space to work with. L with a line, nice space for the next. Oh, sorry, hold on. So this one was 50,000. So I might need a space here for 1,000s. And in my first number, there are no 1,000s letters. So I need to leave space and then write my hundreds, tens letters, and ones. Because there's no zero symbol, just empty space. So plus, I have 100,000. This is my 10,000 column, so 100,000 is going to go over here. I do have a 10,000 section. Then I do have a 1,000 section. I have some hundreds. I have some tens. I have some ones. Now I'm ready to start adding. So there's a lot of setup that one can take for granted, but it's very important. Is everyone with me so far on this one? And again, for some people, I might be going too fast. For some people, I might be going too slowly. I'm totally guessing unless people say stuff, say something. Because usually in a classroom, I can see frowns happening or confused faces, and that tells me, whoops, slow down. Here, there's nothing. I guess you can make a confused face emoji. Uh, Maybe like that one. That'll tell me, whoa, slow down. But without any feedback, I really don't know. All right. So now I go right to left in my ones column. 9 plus 6 is 15, which means I have 10 carried over and a 5 is left. Then I go to the tens column. I have 10. I have 70. So I have 80 so far. And then plus 40 is 120. So 100 goes over, 20 stay behind. Then I have the hundreds column. 100 plus 900 is 1,000 plus another 700. That is 1,700 or 1,700. So 1,000 goes over and the 700 happens to stay just based on the things I happen to add. Then I go to the thousands column. 1,000 plus 4,000 is 5,000. So I have to be comfortable with the subtractive pairs where I see this guy and I read it as 4,000. I don't necessarily think, oh, it's 1,000 less than 5,000. No, after a while, that's one symbol. It's the 4,000 symbol. So you want to get to that point. Otherwise, things get a little confusing and tricky to do a lot of things in a row. Then I move on to my 10,000s column. I have 50,000. Same thing here. I just see 40,000. This is just 40. If I have to explain why is that 40, sure, 10 less than 50 and so on. But I want to get a little above that for convenience. Oh, so what did I say here? 50,000 plus 40,000. That's 90,000. So I write 90,000. And then the last column has nothing really to do. Now you can rewrite these and reduce the space between them, but I really don't care. Everything is there. The spacing is just to help me. You don't have to put them together and squish them or anything like that. How do we feel about addition? We started with a difficult subtraction. We should really have started with addition because it is the easier one, of course, just like you would in school. You start with addition. But that's a typical quiz question. And you have to go in knowing, okay, what do I do first? Line it up, section everything, because that sets me up for success. I know it's too easy, isn't it? You're speechless. No one has anything insightful to say.
I was wondering if you could give us a link of a website where we could practice more of these kinds, because, like you said, there's not much in the book.
I don't really have one, to be honest. I'm sure you can Google it if you need to, but I don't have a website because I just make it up. What you could do, you could easily make up your own, right? You've already established the conversion back and forth, so you should be very comfortable with that before even bothering with arithmetic. So, assuming that's the case, you could very easily make up your own questions and then practice conversion as well. And then you can easily test if your answer is correct. So, let me make this clear what I mean. Oops. So, in the conversion test questions, you can do whatever you want. Use a calculator, scribble numbers all over the place to convert the number. But when it comes to the arithmetic test question, I have to somehow get you to do the arithmetic like we did here within the Roman numbers. That means this is not supposed to be a conversion question. So the goal is not, in terms of the test question, the goal is not to take these two numbers, convert them to whatever their decimal version is. What is this? 50,979 and 144,746. The goal is not to do the conversion, then add those up with Mr. Calculator here. I actually have a calculator in the chat. Let me see if it works still. 50,979 plus 144,746. And I get, oops, 195,725. The goal is not to convert to decimal, then add them up with a calculator or whatever, and then convert them back. Then you've missed the point. This question aims to perform the method, the addition method, within the Roman numbers. And see, when we did it, I never wrote any decimal numbers anywhere. I stayed within the Roman numbers. Now, when I speak to myself, sure, I say the words in English, sure. But what I write down, there is no decimal number anywhere. So a test question, if it's going to be addition, subtraction, or multiplication, is going to tell you do this arithmetic within the number system. Do not write any decimal numbers. And in fact, if I see any decimal numbers for that question, then I just start subtracting and you only have a few marks for it because you've missed the point. You haven't actually answered the question that it's asking. However, if you're making these up to just give yourself extra practice, then I can very easily write some Roman numbers, check what they are, and see what answer I should get. And then I can use, when I do it within the Roman numbers, I get this bottom line here. I can then verify, oh, yes, that is exactly what I should have gotten. So it's not very hard, in my opinion, to make up a whole bunch of questions for yourself. because you would have the conversion sort of set up already. You know how to convert back and forth, so you can very easily check your answers, which is really why I didn't make a lot. Because in making your own questions, you're getting extra practice in converting as well. But when it's a test question on arithmetic, there can be no decimal numbers. There can be no conversion happening. It has to be within the Roman number system. Does that make any kind of sense?
Yes, I think that's very clear.
Okay, good. Just don't want people to be confused um, between what we can do on paper when we practice and what we're expected to do in the test. It's not quite the same. You can do a little more when we're just making questions and practicing, whereas a test is trying to ask a specific thing. Do you understand the method, the written method for addition? And can you apply that method for the Roman numbers? And if we convert to decimals, then do it in a calculator maybe, or even if we write it by hand in the decimal system, we're so used to the look of that decimal setup. It's not really a confirmation that you truly understand the method. We have to step outside that uh, familiarity that we've done thousands of times to really see, do I understand what I'm carrying over and why, and every part of the method. All right, good. So as long as that's clear, everyone should be good to continue. Make questions for yourself. Go nuts. But definitely build this up correctly, right? There's not a lot of variety in this chapter in terms of things I need to prepare. So make sure you don't go to arithmetic before you're very comfortable with converting back and forth. You're just going to do more harm than good. You're not actually saving time. And then when you do the arithmetic, build up, start with addition. Sometimes multiplication can follow addition. That's not a bad idea because the method for multiplication is, I think, much closer to addition than it is to subtraction. So when we do the multiplication, now we might be familiar with different things or different levels of detail when we just have to do something by hand just for our own needs. It's a different situation than teaching. If I were to do, let's keep a fairly simple multiplication, right? It doesn't have to be complicated. 174 times, let's go 3. If I just have to do it, I just want to find the answer as quickly as I can, given the method doesn't really change. Then it doesn't matter what I write down, I just want to find it. So I might do something like, well, 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 7 is 21, plus the 1 I carried over is 22, 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 is 5, and I'm done. Everyone happy with that? So of course, when we, um, well, happy is too strong. I'm not really happy with that. It's correct. But when I think about teaching this to someone else that's just starting out, or demonstrating it, or anything like that, this is really not a way of writing that encourages understanding. It's a way of writing that actually encourages confusion. Because I carry the 1, for example, yet when I multiply, I only multiply with the 7 and then just add the 1. And if I don't know what I'm doing here, there's no indication that that's what I'm supposed to be doing. This does not promote understanding. It is correct. doesn't promote any sort of understanding. So, for that reason, when I think about teaching of any kind, I prefer the more detailed version of the exact same thing. Something that, when you look at it, it promotes a little bit more understanding. Of course, I still have to be there to explain it probably. So I would do 3 times 4. I'm still doing right to left, so I'm still focusing on the ones column first. 3 times 4 is 12. So I write that answer. Now the ones digit is done. Now I'm going to multiply 3 by with I'll say with the tens digit, the tens quantity. So yes, we might say 3 times 7, but that's not really what we're doing. We're really doing 3 times 70, or to say it in an easier way, 3 times 7 tens is 21 tens. And for that reason, the 21 should be positioned over here because it's counting tens. And I maybe put a 0 there to help keep everything in line. So it's very important that if little Timmy is confused about why do you put the 21 there? Why? I have to be able to explain. Well, we say, after a while, we say 3 times 7 because that is the, in essence, the calculation we need to do to find this middle part answer. But that's not really what we're doing. We should always be willing to attach the word tens in this case afterwards. If I'm working in the tens column, then the tens word is after everything. 3 times 7 tens gives me 21 tens. But the essence to find that answer is the calculation 3 times 7. So eventually, after a while, as we get comfortable with it, we drop the tens word, saying that every time because it's tedious and annoying. In the beginning, I might have to emphasize that every single time, and that clarifies things potentially. Then I move on to my hundreds column. 3 times 1, it's not really what we're doing. We're really doing 3 times 100. 3 times one group of 100 is 3 hundreds. And I'll put the zeros there to keep everything nice and lined up. So I've separated these from each other in 3 separate multiplication pieces, and then I just have to add them up, which is usually a very simple addition. But this way, now, once I get the hang of it, it's not really slower. It doesn't take much more time to write these extra lines. But the amount of clarity that it gives me in comparison to the first version is totally worth it, to the point where I would never, if I were to be, if I were to find myself in any sort of classroom or tutoring or anything, I would never ever write this one if it wasn't for myself in private. If anyone is looking, I will never do the first one because it will not help that other person in any way. It doesn't cost me much more time to do a more detailed version that promotes much more understanding. I will never teach the left. It doesn't matter how advanced the student is. If they want to go and do that and sort of simplify it naturally on their own because they're so comfortable doing it, go ahead. I'm never going to encourage them to do that. It doesn't add enough, in my opinion. But if I were to just do it, scribble something for myself in a margin somewhere because I need to, yeah, of course, that's a different story. That's a different objective. So when I've established the way I'm going to go through my method, the way I'm going to lay out my answer, then I'm ready to do the same thing with Roman numbers and just emphasize my awareness of what the method is doing at every step. Any thoughts so far? Some of you might have experience with this, maybe working with students, some of you might not. You'll see their confused faces if you do anything like the left version. Unless they're already super comfortable, which means they didn't really need much teaching anyway. Feel free to interrupt if you have any insights you would like to share. It's good to have other opinions sometimes. I'm not going to take your three problems. I'm just going to do make one up. Then when we do the multiplication questions here and the test, don't worry about making that second number too big. Like if it's a multi-digit number in general, it's not it's only delaying, it's only slowing me down. It's not really new multiplication concepts that come up. It's just slowing me down much, much more. And we're just trying to get the essence of the method. We're not trying to make things overly complicated. So keep that second number nice and simple, something you can do in your head. For example, um, let's go, let's go hundreds maybe. Let's say 500, and let's give it. Oh, no, I already have hundreds. Let's maybe make a couple of tens, and let's maybe make seven. Sure. Now, I don't want to write the time symbol here because my time symbol looks very similar to the X. So I'm just going to write times. In the book, the X and the times, it's visibly different, so they can get away with it. I could get confused maybe. So I'm just going to pick a nice simple number, maybe like 4. 4 is nice. And then do my thing. I've now established I am going to do the long, detailed version of the multiplication. It's not really that much longer. Longer visibly, I suppose. Oh, thank you for your comment. Once I get the hang of it, writing out a few extra lines really doesn't take any noticeable time, but it helps my understanding so much. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Now, it might help you to, because the Roman numbers don't really have zeros to help me line things up. Maybe some dotted lines, some separation, some spacing. Do whatever you need to do. It's a good idea. All right, let's start with the ones column here. 4 times 7. Well, 4 times 7 is 28. So I'm going to just write my answer, 28. Now I know when I move to the tens column, it actually doesn't even matter. It fixes itself. The lining up and where I write my number, it's going to happen automatically. You'll see. I just focus on that portion, that digit, if you will, that place. So I'm going to say 4 times 20. Now here, it's more obvious that it's 4 times 20, and in no way will I say 4 times 2. The, the writing system just doesn't really encourage that. Side benefit of the decimal system is that I can sort of recycle single digit arithmetic even though I'm working with larger quantities. Even if I need to do 3 times 70, I don't really need to think of 3 times 70. I just think of 3 times 7. And the decimal system sort of encourages that recycling of efficient small calculations. Where the Roman number system doesn't really visibly encourage that. What I see in the tens position is 30. It has its own symbols, but it doesn't really make that much of a difference because we pick an easy second number. So 4 times 20 will be 80, and I put my representation for 80 in line with everything else, and there's nothing else. Then I move on to my hundreds column. 4 times 500. Again, I see the 500, so I can't help but do that. It doesn't encourage 4 times 5 like the decimal system does. It's a little bit of a drawback, but our numbers are small enough to handle it. 4 times 500 is 2000. Oh, so I need another column for the thousands, and it's going to go over here with no hundreds, just based on what the numbers are. I then add these up, which is usually a very simple addition. Let's just check the complicated tens column, or most complicated of them all. I have 20 plus 80. That gives me a nice 100. Now I do that. Technically, I should carry the 100 over, and then there's nothing else in the column, so I bring it down, and I have this empty space. There's no actual tens symbols to show. But don't worry about the empty space. That's totally fine. And I have my answer. Now, when you are practicing this on your own, you are welcome to convert these to decimal, do a calculation on your calculator or whatever, convert back, and see, is my Roman answer what it should be. But in a test situation, there can be no decimal numbers anywhere on your answer, or very quickly it's going to be a zero, which will be unfortunate because you might actually know how to do it. You were just tempted by the conversion's convenience. So if you look at my answer here, I have no, I'm staying in the Roman numbers completely. I never converted anything. I never wrote down any decimal numbers. It's all within the Roman number system, even though the method is exactly the same. So that is our goal. And it's then just a matter of practice. Practice, practice, practice. And there aren't that much variety in terms of the kinds of questions that uh, you need to prepare for. You're going to get two conversion questions. Actually, I think it's the very first page of the quiz. Convert this decimal number to a Roman number, convert this Roman number to a decimal number. Big surprise. That's really what we have to be able to do. And then at another stage in the quiz, there will be an arithmetic question looking just like, in terms of phrasing, just like the problems. And you have to set it up, line it up correctly, go through the method, but stay within that number system. Any thoughts so far? That's pretty much it. Once you get the hang of it, the
Excuse me.
yes.
So for the quiz, I want to know this kind of questions. How can we answer it? Like we can draw it uh, in the answering questions, or we download the PDF document and do it uh, like write down in the paper and take a picture, send it back to you, or what?
Yeah, so it depends if you have a printer or not. So I'm gonna give you a PDF with the questions, and there will be
Uh,
space between questions. If you want to print out that PDF, you'll be able to write in the spaces. Or if you don't have a printer, you can just write your answers on blank paper and number them accordingly. But regardless of which one you choose, you will have to take a picture or scan your answers, make a PDF file of all your answers, and then email it back. And if you have a phone, there are many apps that you can use to scan it and make a PDF. You can, if you use things like Microsoft Word, you can drag your pictures in there and save the document. Lots of options, but definitely figure out how you're going to do it. Many people, I guess a surprising number of people have printers. I don't have a printer, but many people do. They choose to print the PDF because then the spacing for the answers and everything's laid out nicely. But many people as well, they just write their answers, number it number one, write your answer just like I did here on the screen. This could be number three. Write my answer on paper, and then Now, if you have a setup like I do here, you can totally write your answers digitally if you know how to do that, but you don't have to. I think the simplest one is write your answers on a piece of paper and then figure out how am I going to scan that in, how am I going to make my answers into a single PDF file and then email it back. That's something you need to figure out and practice before the actual test so that you don't waste time. So
So
just
what
pretend
about the time
I
limit?
take a piece of paper, I write an answer or scribble some stuff, and then I figure out how am I going to take a picture, what scanning app am I going to use, email it to myself to test how quickly that happens, all those things you can do. Sorry, what was your question?
Yeah, so what's about the time limit? Like how long we can use to answer the quiz?
Yes. So we're doing quiz 1 and 2 at the same time. They're together. I just send them out. You do them however you want. It's an hour for each quiz. So you have 2 hours for both quizzes. And then I give an extra 30 minutes to do your scanning and so on. So it's in the, if you look at the course chat, uh, scroll up a little bit, the details for the test. So 9 a.m. we start. Then you have technically until 11:30. Oops, that should be an AM. Whoa, I will edit that right now. AM. Let me edit that before I forget. AM. So you have 2.5 hours to have your email arrive at my inbox. So you have an hour for the first quiz, get you to 10 o'clock. An hour for the second quiz, get you to 11 o'clock. And then you should take the last 30 minutes, if you need it, to scan and send it back so that it has enough time for the email to arrive at my
So that
location.
means yeah, that means we need to send you the answer documents before 11:30 at next Monday, right?
So let's just double check when the test is.
Yeah, next Monday.
Next Monday, yes. So we won't have a session like this. I'll be in Discord posting the test and I'll also email it. And you can send me a private message if you have a question on the test. So I will be around, but we won't be in the voice chat uh, channel. You're just writing the test on your own. But yes, definitely figure out how you are going to scan your answers and send it back to me so that on Monday you know exactly how you're going to do it. You know how long it's going to take. You give yourself enough time because every for if I get the email, if I get your email of the answers after 11:30, depending on how long after 11:30, then I have to um, give you a penalty because you might have used more time than you're allowed to use. So it's important to make sure that your email comes back before 11:30. Give yourself a nice buffer. But an hour for each quiz, in my experience, really is more than enough time. If you've practiced correctly, you've prepared, uh, it's open book as well, right? So that makes it even easier. An hour should really be more than enough time based on what I've seen before.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We don't have much else going on. While you think of other questions, I'll be right back. Just give me 1 second here. questions for our last 15 minutes. Usually, this is how the Roman number chapter goes. There aren't that much, there's not that much variety in questions. You know what's expected. It's just a matter of how much practice do I need to get on top of everything. Now, I'll sort of give a preview. What is happening tomorrow is pretty much the same thing, except we are looking at the Babylonian number system. But the kinds of questions and everything will be the same. Now, the system, of course, is a very different system, but we're still, our goals are still, are we able to convert from a decimal number to the Babylonian system, from Babylonian number to, sorry, from a decimal number to a Babylonian number, from a Babylonian number to a decimal number, convert to two directions, and then the same arithmetic uh, kinds of questions, addition, subtraction, multiplication. So in terms of what to expect, it's very straightforward. It's just a different number system with different pros and cons. And when we do both, we can look back. Well, what are the pros and cons of each? Uh, as you work through the videos and in the book, you'll see uh, what I mean. And then when we get to chapter 7, you'll have a day to maybe catch up and one extra day to prepare for that. Um, we're then sort of directing ourselves more to our familiar decimal system and the digits that we see, and but it's the same kind of questions, conversion questions, arithmetic questions, just in different systems. Yeah.
I was wondering if we could go back to chapter 2, and I was facing a problem solving problem 2.14 in chapter 2.
Problem. Okay, let's try and find it. 2.14 problem. Where is that? Oh, whoa, I see something. That one. Oh, good. Nice and nice. Very nice. This one. Problem
Uh,
214.
yes,
Sure, we could do that.
thank you.
All right. So now I see I have a knights and knaves question. I do scan over it, but I don't really pay too much attention to what they're saying yet. I just want to set up my answer first. So I see, okay, knights and knaves. Oh, there's spies as well. Knights always tell the truth. That's consistent with other examples we've done. Knaves always lie. And now I have this spy that can pretty much say anything. Okay, so then I meet three people, John, Bill, and Tom. So now I know how I'm going to set up the knights and knaves. I can't scroll apparently. Hold on. There we go. So, oh, what's this line doing here? This is problem 214. So I have John, I have Bill, and I have Tom. So now I just check, is there any information that reduces my options? Yes, because it says here, one is a knight, one is a knave, one is a spy. So I can't have knight, 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 things like that. They're all different. So now I go through my options, maybe knight, knave, spy, or knight, and then the other two can flip, spy, knave, or Bill could be a knight, and then I can have knave, spy, or the other way around, spy, knave, or Tom could be a knight, and I could have the other two knave, spy, or the other way around, spy, knave. And without that restriction, there would be a lot more options. Too many, too many. But at least this gives me a manageable list. So now I know my approach. I'm going to go through one row at a time, looking at what they're saying. And I know the rules of the game. Knight always has to tell the truth. Knave always lies. And the spy, well, they can say anything. But I use that at the end to compare. So now I look at what each person is saying. John says, I am a knight. Now I'm in row 1, examining if that is consistent with the rules. John says I'm a knight. Oh, he is a knight. That's true. Bill says John is telling the truth. John is telling the truth, so that's true. Tom says I am the spy, and that's true. So now to examine if this scenario could possibly happen, I see, well, a knight should tell the truth. He is telling the truth. Good. A knave should lie, but he's telling the truth, so that can't happen. So that scenario is impossible. And then I move on to the next one. How does that feel so far?
Yes, this looks good, and I think I did manage to do this, but if we go further down, it's a
We have
little.
nothing else to do. Let's continue. So now that one's out, I move on to the next one. And there might be, I think in one of these, there's some typo in the answer key that I corrected with a comment, but not all devices show comments on a PDF. So it's good to do this one. It might have been this one. I can't remember which one it is. So next scenario, knight, spy, knave. Now I look again. John says, John, where's John? John says, I am a knight. That is true. Bill says, John is telling the truth. That is true. And Tom says, I am the spy. That is false. In this scenario, Tom is a knave. So then I check. Okay, knight, truth. Yes, that is how he should behave. Now, a spy, I can't really say if this is correct behavior or not because the spy can say anything, so I kind of skip it. Tom, being a knave, should tell a lie. He does tell a lie, so that's consistent as well. So this one seems very much possible. So that seems to be my answer. It's consistent with all the rules that they give me. Now, it is good practice, if you have the time, to go through each of the other ones. And if you get impossible for all of them, that just makes you feel a little bit better that you did, in fact, find the right answer, because there can only be one answer. So if you get two that are possible, then something went wrong.
Yes, I think what I kept fretting over was I did not know what to do with the spy because the spy was true or false.
Yes, you can pretty much do nothing. He's just there to confuse us a little bit because we can't decide he how he behaves. He can behave any way he wants. So we can't really use that in any way.
Okay, this looks good now. Thank you so much.
Good. Those are always fun. Any other questions? I have 6 minutes to fill. I guess we don't have to, but technically we have 6 minutes left to do whatever you need to do. I have a private message. Let's just check that while I'm waiting for other questions. No other questions. quiet. So quiet. Why is it so quiet? All right, it seems like everyone's pretty good. We don't have to push it all the way to 10:30 every single time. If there aren't any questions, we are going to end it here. Hopefully, you have time to finish the Babylonian chapter for tomorrow. Just notice how the flow is the same kinds of questions, just a different number system with its own pros and cons. Uh, but that should make it a little bit better, and then by Thursday we'll wrap everything up. All right, thank you for another good session, and best of luck with the next chapter.